Let's go. Welcome back to another episode of the MVP Fantasy Football and Sports Podcast. My name is Tyler Johnson, and Ryan Elke is going to be out today due to sickness. I know that he's been battling a cold, and also we have not been able to get on the same page for getting us both together this week. So I thought I would just do a quick, short kind of episode. I wanted to touch on a lot of the news. There's a lot of things that dropped that I think a lot of people out there need to know if they're listening to me. Just one thing I want to tell everyone is that I listen to a ton of podcasts. I listen to a ton of YouTube, kind of podcasts on YouTube. So if you're listening to me and you're listening to Ryan, we do a lot of research outside of just this podcast. So it's kind of like you're getting an overall take from every little which angle. So getting into it to this week, we're going to touch on a lot of the news, a lot of the big wide receiver news that's coming out, injuries, a couple running backs, and then also wanted to jump into kind of a couple wide receivers that I feel like are being taken a little early compared to a couple sleeper wide receivers that have a huge amount of upside that have flashed last year. And I just wanted to touch on the draft and how it's going for me. We just did our trading day league, and it is a startup draft 10-man league. And we did our roster or our draft positions, and I got the 4th spot. So I kind of want to break down that 4th spot, what I'm seeing with all the mock drafts I'm doing. I had to have done close to 100 already. I know that we're already talking trades with our draft pick trades and everything like that. So I wanted to jump into what pick number 4 looks like and the kind of the strategies that I'm breaking down as I do some mock drafts with people. Another thing to touch on is here in Wisconsin, it is hot as hell. Okay, so we are hitting 100 degrees, but this isn't a dry 100 degrees. This is like 100 degrees. Humidity is up. It is killer. I am sweating my butt off in my room. We don't have any AC at this house, and all we have here is heating. So we're used to cold, so I got to have all the windows shut up and hopefully to retain any sort of coolness in this house. Along with that, I've just been doing a ton of wedding planning. Anyone out there who's done wedding planning, it's not as stressful as I thought it was going to be, but there's a lot of stuff going on at once that you have to keep track of. So anyone that has any questions on that, I am going to be an expert after this year. So probably as soon as our fantasy league is ending, and that's about the time that I'll be getting married. So any questions, let me know. And I'm going to jump into it right away. I know we have a huge announcement, a little bit late now, but Tyreek Hill not getting suspended. That's a huge hit to the NFL and to a lot of the allegations and suspensions that have happened to previous players. A lot of people have been bringing up that subject of, it was a abuse charge that was now turned into no suspension, child abuse, but yet you have people that are smoking marijuana, people that have not done such a bad allegation against Hill, but he's not getting suspended for it. So that has to show that there wasn't enough evidence, because they went through a lot of professionals to come to the solution that there wasn't enough evidence and that he's not getting suspended. So unfortunately for us, we have to take that out of our mind and we have to put him right back in our rankings. And right now, looking at kind of his average draft position, I know that this is kind of catching up to the news, but he's jumping up into the 3rd round. And obviously we know he's going to go probably early 2nd. Just like last year, he was at late 2nd, early 3rd pick. I think this year, now that he became the number 1 wide receiver, at least for PPR, he's going to be up there within the bottom of the 1st, beginning of the 2nd. And I think that's the correct place for him. I don't see anything going sideways with Tyreek Hill that would cause him to, 1, either be suspended mid-season, or 2, he's not going to produce. He's going to be up and down. He's going to be volatile. Tyreek Hill, he had some bad games last year, but then he had some games that absolutely just, you don't even need the rest of your wide receiver core because you have Tyreek Hill that put up 40 points. So that's what I think about Tyreek. I know that, last year he had only 87 receptions, and that kind of goes to show the up and down you're going to get with him. He's kind of like a souped up Amari Cooper, to where Amari Cooper is that bang or bust type of wide receiver. Tyreek Hill is more bang with just that little bit of bust for a wide receiver 1. So moving on to the next subject, we have Melvin Gordon. And I have drafted Melvin Gordon in the Dynasty League, and it is a bummer to hear that he has continued to hold out, and the team is also not meeting halfway or not meeting to what Gordon is expecting. And it's going to be very interesting seeing as they're going to start getting into training camp here. And he must show up. I mean, it's in his contract. And if he doesn't, let's say come preseason game 1 or even the training camp day 1, I'm going to start worrying a little bit. I did not take Jackson as a backup, and I think that was a huge mistake now. I know that the person who owns Jackson has been reaching out to me and seeing if I was looking for a trade. And to me, it's like you kind of get that eaten up feeling that you don't want to trade away like somebody in the mid-round picks that you picked that he's going to be looking for, because now people that own Jackson are going to try and sell him high now and not take that gamble of, oh, Gordon yes, Gordon no. People that have Jackson right now, I would say to sell him high, because you can probably get either a draft pick going into the rookie season, or you can get maybe him, put Jackson with maybe one of your upper tier wide receivers to just bump it up to that next tier. Or same goes with running back, tight end. Put him with one of those guys and then bump him up and talk him up as an RB1, because you can use that one game that he had in the playoffs last year. And I know I used him in that one, I think it was week 14. I would say week 14. And he won me that first playoff game. So Justin Jackson is a must sell, I would say. And then let's go into our next bit of news here is going to be a little bit small, but it's something that we know. Julian Edelman spotted at a camp with a brace over his left thumb. We all know Julian Edelman to be a injury-prone wide receiver. You don't draft him knowing that you're going to get 16 games out of him. I mean, literally, he slants across the middle. Tom Brady hits him with that slant pattern, and he gets destroyed. And then he's out for like half the game, or at least a couple quarters, or if not, an entire game. So we know Julian Edelman. I don't know what he did with his thumb. Guaranteed it was something silly. Maybe he's popping more pills. I don't know. But Julian Edelman is a great player when he's on the field. And I know that I drafted him in our Dynasty League late. People know that he only has a couple of years left in his career here. And Tom Brady will be gone. But I think that we're going to get some solid numbers out of him this year. At least good enough to use him for 8 to 10 games. And I look forward to those games because he puts up big numbers. He's a wide receiver too, and he is being drafted pretty high. Surprisingly, he's going at the end of the 4th, early 5th, as I'm looking at it here. And I don't know. I would take Julian Edelman, maybe pushing the 6, because there's people like Stephon Diggs, Brandon Cooks is going around him, and I would rather have both those guys than Julian Edelman, just because I have a feeling that they're going to be a little more healthy, especially Brandon Cooks. And I'll talk about him a little bit later as we get on to more of the news and the next segment. So going to the next news is going to be DeAndre Hopkins beginning of the camp on the PUP list. And it's only the mandatory PUP. He is not anything that I'm looking at and being worried about, but it is something to talk about because you have the number one, almost unanimous number one wide receiver drafted off the board when it comes to redraft. And talk about as consistent as they come. When you're drafting Hopkins, you know that you're getting that 1,000+ yards. You're getting that 100+ receptions. I mean, I'm going to go over to his stats right now. I'll let you know what he's played in 16 out of 16 games, all but 1 year, and that was in 2017 when he played 15. So you only missed one game if you drafted Hopkins the last 6 years. So that's incredible. As a wide receiver, as big as he is, you see guys like that have ankle problems. I mean, like I was just talking about with Stephon Diggs. He's super young, already has foot problems. But now we go over to Hopkins going into 2019. He's going to be turning 27 years old. I mean, last year, 163 targets, 115 receptions. And I think he's going to hover around that 100 reception range. I don't think he goes up to 115 this year. I say he stays at 100, around 150 targets. And, I mean, that's good enough that I would draft. I've been drafting Hopkins at the 4 spot in my mock drafts just to see what it would look like. And, I mean, it's not bad, but it's hard to pass up one of those top 4 running backs. So, DeAndre Hopkins, his shoulder, I don't know if it bugs me a lot, but it would make me possibly second guess if it still stays throughout training camp. You get to your draft and you're still unsure. You might want to pivot to running back. I mean, a lot of people I could see saying, well, if Hopkins is hurt at that 5-6 range, I might go David Johnson, or I might go Melvin Gordon if Melvin Gordon reports, or Devontae Adams. I know a lot of people want to draft Devontae Adams over him. I mean, you could do it, and I wouldn't second guess it. But the way that Hopkins has been so reliable, I have a feeling they're just going to wait until he's 100%. They already know he does it, so I'm not worried about DeAndre Hopkins. And then moving on, Julio Jones. No long-term extension for Julio Jones, but his reporting, I mean, it just shows the type of guy he is. Julio Jones is putting up massive stats every single year. He's going to be turning 30 next year. I mean, he's coming off a 1,600, almost 1,700 yard performance, 170 targets on 113 receptions. I'm telling you, Julio brought it on. I mean, the first half of the season last year where people were like, oh, no touchdowns. Julio does not score touchdowns. Ridley was scoring a lot of those touchdowns across the middle and breaking them for a long reception. But Julio then started to pick it up in the second half. I'm pretty sure he had like 6 in the second half, and he was going in like after 6 games, he only had 2 touchdowns or something silly like that. And if we can get that Julio on fire from the second half of the season, I mean, I'm putting him up there as one of my top 3 receivers this year. I would probably go Hopkins and then Adams, Julio, somewhere in that order for those 2. So I'm a big fan of Julio, and I'm a big fan that he is still there for the team. We know that they're playing in the Dome a lot this year, so Matt Ryan is a huge pickup later in the drafts for redraft, and I am loving all of the Matt Ryan. As long as I can get him for a good price. I mean, Matt Ryan in the Dome, I think it was something absurd to where it was like half the season or something like that. So take a look into that, because Julio is going to be a monster, and I have a feeling that's why Ridley is so high. And I'm going to talk about Ridley in a little bit. So let's move on to the next. We got Arizona Cardinals. News coming out that David Johnson receiving skills to come back to the forefront. And just hearing that gives me chills, because David Johnson was a first-round draft pick a few years ago, and he was coming into that season. That's when he got hurt. But coming off of that huge season of 1,200 yards, receiving, he was close to 900 yards, 80 receptions. If we can just, you got to think too, he's turning 28, so he's in that prime, a little bit past his prime 26 range, and I can see him totally coming into his own. New offense, new running quarterback in Kyler. It's hard to say, because I see him, and whenever I'm drafting, I always pivot away from him. And I know a lot of people are drafting him with confidence, but it's hard to have confidence in a guy that has gotten injured, only played like in a quarter, and then all of a sudden, last year, he played 16 games. He was close to 1,000 yards, but 50 receptions of 400 yards receiving. It wasn't the performance that you wanted from David Johnson. So everyone wants to rethink back to the 2016, and it's hard to, I mean, I would be confident in him if I had him, but seeing as we're from the outside looking in, I mean, what if it's more of an Amari Cooper type situation where you have that one blow up season, and then all of a sudden you have these seasons afterwards where it's on off, you flash, he's been injured, and everyone wants to jump back into that 2016 David Johnson, and it's not there. And you drafted him with your 6th, 7th pick. I mean, some people are even drafting him right after Kamara, CMC, Zeke, Barkley, and at that 5 spot. And to me, that's a lot put on his shoulders after seeing last season. I would be so glad to draft him probably mid-second, as I think where he should go. But I mean, he's up there past, I mean, some of the guys here. I'll jump over there. So you got David Johnson. His average draft position is at the 105. So like I said, right after those first 4 guys. I mean, I would almost, if Melvin Gordon showed up, I guess it is hard, because after that Melvin Gordon, David Johnson, I see that's my first tier right there, and then it drops off, and it is kind of murky when you get into that James Conner, Le'Veon Bell, Damian Williams, Todd Gurley, Chubb, Cook, Mixon. So I can't wait to do an episode on all of these running backs, and I think that's what we're going to do next week, because this week I kind of want to touch on a few of the wide receivers and kind of what I'm seeing in the first few rounds for wide receivers, who I like, who I don't like, who I think is getting overdrafted. So we'll jump into that in the next segment, but I just want to touch kind of on David Johnson. I do believe in him as the player, But I would this year try to stay away from him at that 6th spot. I would love to have DeAndre Hopkins over David Johnson. I don't know about that Melvin Gordon, David Johnson, but I would almost draft Adams over both those also. I would probably put Hopkins at my 6, Adams at my 7. I mean, I would almost even go Julio at 8 and then let everyone else kind of battle over those running backs, because people eat those running backs up that have kind of that they kind of have that risk coming with them or the uncertainty, and then you can get a good wide receiver coming back around. So that kind of does it for the news. If there's anything else, let me double check and see if there was anything else that popped up that maybe I can talk about right away. I'm looking at the top here. You got Gordon's extension isn't coming soon. Very scary, especially for a Gordon owner. I mean, it makes me sweat. Travis Kelce ankle ready for training camp. So not worried about Kelce. We got Geronimo Allison reports for his 4th NFL training camp. Remains focused. I like it. So Geronimo Allison. I guess we could quick touch on Geronimo Allison. Talk about trying to pick that number 2 between him and MVS. And I have found myself drafting MVS a little bit more than Geronimo Allison. But that does not say that he's better, because Allison could jump into that slot role and you could get that Randall Cobb. And we all know how good Randall Cobb was because he was fantasy relevant. And it's almost like you're drafting that Golden Tate from the Lions, where Adams over the top, you got another big guy, MVS, over the top, and then you got Allison streaking in the middle. Allison could turn into a PPR type of receiver that is worth it for those later rounds. So let's see here. Anything else before I move on? We got Tevin Coleman to be the de facto lead back, but that's with a question mark. Yeah, we'll talk about that backfield a little bit later, because I think that backfield, especially when you go further in the draft and you see Tevin Coleman, he is going pretty high, and he is said to be the, from what average draft position is saying, to be the lead person. And I don't know. I don't know who it is there, and I look forward to talking with Ryan. We'll go over some running backs next week. So that'll do it then for the news. I'm not seeing anything too crazy. Oh, I did want to touch on one more thing. Bengals had just reached an agreement with Tyler Boyd for a 4-year, $43 million extension. Talk about propping up Tyler Boyd. I mean, this guy right here, last year, as long as he was playing with AJ Green, was putting up fantasy numbers. I'm pretty sure he was top 15 during the weeks that he was playing, and I had him on my team, and I was able to ship him before the downfall happened because AJ Green got hurt. He was thrusted into the lead role at wide receiver, and he did not produce like how people were thinking he was going to. And that shows kind of another argument that I wanted to make in regards to, you know, that the number 2 is doing really well, like Tyler Boyd. And I have somebody in mind right now that I'll talk about in a second. And then all of a sudden the top guy goes away, and Tyler Boyd was not ready to take on that wide receiver 1 role. And I don't know if maybe he's just not prepared for it, and that if you gave him a little more training camp, a little more action in front of AJ Green, he could turn into that lead dog role. I mean, we're going to need another AJ Green after he's gone, so I guess we'll see. But the person I was comparing him to is Juju. And I know I'm a huge Steelers fan, but Juju is in the kind of the same position, because you had Antonio Brown in front of him for so long, and now he's gone, and we really haven't seen Juju pushed into the forefront, kind of like how Tyler Boyd was last year. So that's kind of just a little worry. That I love Juju. I've been drafting him if he falls to me in the 2nd round, and I'll cover that in the next segment. But Juju as a player is excellent. He's young, but I don't think that he has shown to be the wide receiver 1 with not many people around him with skill. I mean, you have Williams, and I mean, your number 2 isn't going to be anyone that's like Juju and Brown. So you don't have the 2 there. And I guess we will see, because that adds a little bit of doubt in my mind that Juju might not be as good as everyone is propping him up to be. But you do have Big Ben there, and if Big Ben throws like a career high like he did last year, Juju will definitely suck up some of them targets. I mean, he was ahead of Antonio Brown anyway, but if he gets even more, I mean, we'll see possibly a number 1 wide receiver. But if he doesn't jump to the occasion, just like how Tyler Boyd didn't, I mean, he could be pushed out of top 10. He could be pushed out of top 15. I don't see top 15. I could say him. What if he gets pushed to like number 12? I think you'd be sad drafting him as far as you are. So just kind of some things to touch on. Maybe people thought about that. I know that I'm still drafting Juju, and I'm still drafting Tyler Boyd with the idea that they do put up huge numbers and they do get some targets. So moving on to the next list. So I wanted to touch on kind of a couple of guys that I feel like are getting drafted pretty early compared to where I think they should be going. And it's kind of that same situation as like a, let me see here. I was going to bring up somebody that I was looking at before, Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett last year, I think he was drafted way too early. And then all of a sudden, maybe the last 2 seasons. And Tyler Lockett is a guy similar to Calvin Ridley that I'm going to talk about right now. Calvin Ridley, he's getting drafted mid-6th round. But he's getting drafted around people like Mike Williams, Chris Godwin, Cooper Kupp. I think a lot of people like that are getting pushed up. And this is kind of a tier break for me, where you have Brandon Cooks, Kenny Galladay, Julian Edelman, Stephon Diggs, and then you cut. You got Robert Woods. I'm not sure if I said Robert Woods. And you got that tier cut, and all of a sudden you go to Tyler Lockett, Calvin Ridley, Cooper Kupp, Mike Williams, Chris Godwin. And then you got Tyler Boyd right there too. So Calvin Ridley is one of those guys where it's going to be very hit or miss, but I can't count him out with the amount of games they're playing indoor. You have Matt Ryan and you have Julio over the top. It's kind of that same situation as a number 2 would have, all like the Randall Cobb situation. And Calvin Ridley is fast. He's a great wide receiver, and he had quite a few touchdowns last year. It was at 10 touchdowns. So talk about taking a lot of what Julio could have had and how great Julio could have been. But then they're using him to his strengths. They're giving him on the slants, and he's taking it to the house. His catch percentage was close to 70%. That's excellent. And he had 800, he played in all 16 games. He only started in 5, and he had 800 receiving yards. But to me, looking at the draft, I always pass him up. I don't think I've ever drafted him. I've always wanted somebody else around that area. If it's not if it's not like a Julian Edelman or Stephon Diggs or Kenny Galladay, after that tier break, I almost just let that group go, and I'm going to be drafting a running back in that situation. So, like I said, I'll touch on my area of pick 4 and let you know kind of what I'm looking at. So, Calvin Ridley, nothing's really changed for the Falcons, so I guess we'll see. The only thing that's changed is Devontae Freeman's coming back, which is another person that I'm pretty high on if he falls to me. I've seen him fall to me in the 4th round, and that is just beautiful. So let's see here. Moving on, another person that I was very low on, but I've been listening to a lot of pros talk about Jarvis Landry. And Jarvis Landry, to me, was just somebody I could not get out of my head. He just played terrible last year. And I know it's a new team. He didn't get the amount of he got a ton of targets, but not an amount of receptions. So talk about a guy that got targeted 150 times, only came down with 80 of them. He had almost a 50% catch rate, which was the lowest in the league. So looking at Jarvis Landry, there's a lot of people who are just pushing him down, and his average draft position is getting pushed down. And the more I'm looking at Jarvis Landry, the more I'm kind of liking where he's at. Let me find out exactly where he's being drafted at. He's getting drafted around like Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore. I'm going to take all of Jarvis Landry if he's at the 8th, 9th round. And in all these average draft positions, I'm looking at it as a 10-team draft. So we're going with an even 10 teams. Being in the 8th, 9th, you would just have to add about a half a round for all these guys if you're in a 12-team league. So looking at Jarvis Landry, he is used to having a ton of targets. I think last year's targets were just him getting used to the quarterback. The quarterback is always switching around. Tyrod Taylor, there's nothing else you could say except that he's used to having those targets, but he's having better targets. And the better targets that he gets coming up this year, is the more why I like Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry is going into this season as the number 2 now. He really has never been a wide receiver 2 on a team. And if you put Landry in any sort of role behind Odell, I think he's going to emerge as a great pickup. And like, I want to use that example again of Golden Tate on the Lions. You're looking for this PPR monster where people are double covering Odell Beckham going down the streaking. And then you got a Jarvis Landry catching that slant and taking it for 10, 20 yards. And you get all those points. Let's say that's like one play, 4 points. And you could probably get that 4 or 5 times a game. And then that would just be fantastic. I think his catch percentage is going to go back to his normal 70. And I mean, I'm starting to hype up Jarvis Landry here when I used to hate him. Well, I shouldn't say hate. I used to dislike where he was going. And every time I saw him, it was kind of like that Calvin Ridley, where I would see him, I would not take him ever. I would always look for a different position around him and then draft that. So I've gotten Jarvis Landry in a lot of my mock drafts. A couple other guys I wanted to touch on that could be potential sleepers or have shown flashes in the past year. And all it will take is either an injury or even not an injury. They could just take the next step. So first one I want to touch on is Keke QT. So you're talking about a wide receiver core here. We were just talking about Hopkins. And then you got Will Fuller. I mean, those 3 guys, the backfield, Lamar Miller isn't catching any passes. They don't have a tight end on their team that's catching any passes that you're drafting this year. Keke QT even put up better fantasy games than Will Fuller, and that was with Will Fuller in the game. And then Will Fuller got hurt, and Keke was a good play. I wouldn't say that he was that wide receiver 2. He had some wide receiver 2 games, but I would say he's a great wide receiver 3 flex play, and you can draft him pretty much free at the end of the rounds. Let's see if I can find him here on where he's going. I would assume he's probably going around like the 12th round. I'm going to go right to the 12th. He's even at the 15th round. So you're getting Keke at the 15th round, and we all know the injury risk with Will Fuller. It takes one drop from Will Fuller, and he's out for a few games, or you can draft Keke, and he is the wide receiver 2 at Houston. So I like Keke. I'm drafting him, and let's say the first couple games go by and you don't get anything out of him. You can always just drop him and bring up somebody else, because 15th round, you're kind of just picking up these players that you're hoping are going to take another step past who their competition is. So, and I guess that'll say to me, I'm not drafting much of Will Fuller. He's another guy that is possibly going a little too far up. He's in that same range as I was talking about before when it comes to you're looking at like the Geronimo Allison, Dante Pettis, Cortland Sutton, Allen Robinson. I'm getting a lot of Allen Robinson as well. I'm thinking he's going to take another step. So kind of bullish on Allen. So Keke QT, I'll take him almost 5 rounds later, and I'm thinking I'm almost getting the same player. So moving on to my last guy I wanted to talk about that I think is going to be, and he's in the same exact situation Keke is, and that is, I shouldn't say same, Curtis Samuel for Carolina. Curtis Samuel, he's going into his 3rd season. He's behind the hotness that is DJ Moore, but we really don't know exactly how that offense is going to play. Looking at a hurt Cam, who is now coming back. Hopefully he's healthy, and if it's a healthy Cam, he's running a little bit. I see Curtis Samuel getting a ton of targets, and I could see him equaling DJ Moore for targets, and it's what he does with those targets. Curtis Samuel showed some great flashes, and just like I'm talking about QT, I think Samuel had a couple wide receiver 2 games, and he could also be that wide receiver 3 flex, and he's someone that you're getting for free as well. He's all the way in the same area. Curtis Samuel's in the 13th, so a little bit more expensive than Keke, and you're really not paying much. You're looking at like Curtis Samuel or Emmanuel Sanders, or Curtis Samuel and Austin Eckler. So I like picking them up. I've gotten them in a lot of my mock drafts just looking at my team, and it's picking up these lower guys that have that possibility of being in this high-tempo offense. I mean, you got Houston, high-tempo offense. You got one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and then you got Curtis Samuel. Cam Newton he's shown to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and then he's also fighting for that wide receiver 1 spot on that team. I mean, I know he's the 2, but I can see them being very equal. And then you have CMC that is catching most of the passes on that team. I'm pretty sure CMC was the highest receptions, and I can see that team wanting to stick with that. but then also getting the receivers a little more involved. So I want a piece of this offense, and I'm not afraid to take Curtis Samuel and have him on my bench just to see what I have with him. So that's just kind of touching on that. I wanted to go into now my draft spot. I got the 4th draft spot, and I'm seeing it as almost a blessing. I got it. It's all randomized, and getting this 4th spot, I've grown to like it. When I first saw it, I'm like, oh man, I'm not one that likes to draft one of the top 4 running backs. I like to get like the 7, 8 spot and then have that quick 1, 2, and you can either get that double great wide receiver, or you pick up a solid back end running back like Melvin Gordon or David Johnson, and then come back around and get that Julio Jones or that Odell Beckham. So that's usually what I like to do at the end. But now that I'm number 4, I'd rather just get whatever drops to me. I have a feeling that this Zeke news, so you have Zeke and Dak Prescott kind of both talking about sitting out or having a holdout to try and get that extension. And it is very possible that Zeke is scary, just a scary draft pick as that top 4. So he might fall to me, and I wouldn't be scared to grab Zeke at the 4. And if Zeke continues to show that he's not going to show up for the team, or him and Dak are continuing to look for this more money, I might even draft either a David Johnson or a Melvin Gordon or DeAndre Hopkins over him. So we'll see. Right now I'm drafting 4th. Let's say everything goes as planned. I'm normally going to get like a Kamara or a CMC, and I'm loving that because I get that one great running back. Don't have to worry about my RB1. It comes back around to me, and normally I always have the choice of either Juju, Antonio Brown, or Mike Evans, because Odell usually gets picked. Even though on this average draft position it says Odell would fall to me, he's not going to. A ton of running backs are going before me, and I love seeing that, and I hope when our draft comes around, I'm looking at like Todd Gurley, Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook, Joel Mixon, James Conner, Le'Veon Bell, all those guys going before me. I wouldn't even if they fell to me, I wouldn't even draft them at my 4 spot, because I'm one that likes to grab my running back 1 right away and then pair him up with a solid wide receiver 1. And it's hard to go into a draft when your wide receiver 1 is like a Adam Thielen or a T.Y. Hilton. So I'm thinking that this is going to be a little bit mixed up, but I'm almost certain that I'm going to get a Mike Evans, a Juju, or an Antonio Brown as my 2nd pick. So that'll give me my wide receiver 1 and my running back 1. And then going back around, so a lot of players are going to get picked. You're going to miss out on, I mean, of course, I'd love to see Tyreek Hill fall to me, but he's going to definitely get pushed all the way up there. I would almost enjoy to see like an Adam Thielen, an AJ Green. We're looking at Stephon Diggs, possibly as my wide receiver 2. I know that looking at running backs is important. A lot of people like to prop up running backs early. For me, and I know that Ryan is the same way, we have so much success, and I kind of want to talk to everybody about so much success with wide receivers, high-end wide receivers, early in drafts. And normally, like I said, if I'm later in the draft, I'm going to draft that high wide receiver and then grab that running back and then just go wide receiver. So it's kind of the mentality I have here is grabbing wide receiver, and then while that round 4 comes around, I'm picking up that so I got Mike Evans. I possibly have a Juju. I possibly have a looking at Adam Thielen, looking at Keenan Allen, AJ Green, trying to get one of those guys as my 2nd wide receiver. And then I'm looking down the list here going into round 4, and I'm trying to pick up maybe a Stephon Diggs. I'm looking at Brandon Cooks. I picked up a lot of Brandon Cooks as my 3rd wide receiver. And looking at the running backs going around that position, you got David Johnson. I mean, I'm looking at Josh Jacobs, Kerryon Johnson. And those 3 guys, of course, everyone's talking them up, and they're going to be good. But I have a feeling that they have a lot of question marks around them. And if I'm going to draft somebody with question marks, especially a running back in the 4th round, I'd rather skip over it and draft a question mark running back in the 5th or 6th round and just grab myself somebody I know that's going to be good, like a Keenan Allen, or like I know Stephon Diggs is up and down, but you can pick up a Stephon Diggs, and then Brandon Cooks. You know Brandon Cooks is going to be good. You know Kenny Golladay is going to get the targets. Picking up one of them guys over a David Johnson or over a Josh Jacobs, because they're the new hotness, and a lot of people like to draft them early. Let those guys go early. I'm going to pick up these wide receivers. So I already got 3 wide receivers then. And then I'm jumping into, the 5th round here. Now I can start looking at running back. And running backs are still plentiful when you want to go for a starting running back. I've drafted a lot of James White. ADP has him in round 8, but I guarantee you he's going to be up in the 6th or up in the 5th. James White is just going to continue to push up the more we hear about Sony Michel being injured and Sony Michel not being able to stay on the field. So I'm getting a lot of James White. I'm possibly getting him in the 7th or the 6th and using the 7th for sometimes another wide receiver. If another wide receiver falls to me, I know I pick up Brandon Cooks, but let's talk about the San Francisco not the San Francisco. We're looking at round 6. So we're looking at like the Chris Godwin, Mike Williams, Cooper Kupp, Ridley area. And that's usually when I'm drafting another running back. I'm probably taking like I've drafted Kenyon Drake quite a few times. I have a feeling that he's going to have a big role in Miami finally. I know later on in the draft I'm drafting Latavius Murray and getting Tariq Cohen. I mean, there's tons of guys down here that you could go 4 straight wide receivers plus having that first round running back. And then you're drafting people like Lamar Miller, like James White, like Tariq Cohen, like Kenyon Drake. I mean, look at all these guys down low that we could be drafting right now. I mean, I could take Damian Harris. I can take Jalen Samuels. There's a lot of guys. There's a lot of starters down here and the backups that are going to be fantasy relevant that you should not feel worried if you miss out on that first huge chunk of running backs round 1 through 5. Because there's guys down here that you can plug in and you could roll with a Kamara and then have a stud wide receiver core like Juju, Mike Evans. You're looking at maybe Adam Thielen or Keenan Allen and then Brandon Cooks as your flex. And then you just fill in your last running back with like a Latavius Murray or a Lamar Miller, and they're only going to score 5 points less than who you're going up against, who has, let's say someone drafted Josh Jacobs up in the 4th round, and then you drafted James White or Lamar Miller in the 8th, and I don't see them scoring too much different. I know that he's going to score less, but it's a lot less compared to me having a Keenan Allen and them taking a shot with like a Sammy Watkins or an Alshon Jeffrey. So I think that the upside of like an AJ Green over a Sammy Watkins or an Adam Thielen over a Tyler Boyd, you know what I mean? So kind of my strategy going into it, I've done the 1 running back, 4 wide receiver, 1 running back. I've also liked the 1 running back, 3 receivers, and then a running back in that 5th round if somebody drops to me. A lot of people that I've seen that drop to me that I've drafted an earlier running back is usually going to be, let me find him here. Let's see where he's going. Devontae Freeman. So he's going at the end of the 3rd. I've seen him fall all the way to the 4th, and I've drafted him as my running back in the 4th round right after 2 stud wide receivers. And then I used the last 2 picks to draft 2 more wide receivers after that. I mean, just think about starting a draft with Kamara, Juju, Mike Evans, then you get Devontae Freeman, and then you finish off your draft with, what do you got there, like AJ Green, Brandon Cooks, Kenny Galladay. So kind of my thought process. I know later on me and Ryan will talk later on about sleepers and people that we are looking at. I've already talked about a couple of wide receivers on here. Next week we're going to touch on running backs. And I'm going to finish it off with a couple questions I pulled right off of Sleeper. And these questions are going to be kind of quick answers, but I like hearing what the community and what the people out there are asking. And it kind of gives you an idea of the people like in your league or in your public leagues, how they think or what they're thinking about. Because really you would look at these trades and be like, oh, there's no way that he would even consider it or want to even talk about it. But then you see him post up here asking about it, and it makes you scratch your head that maybe I should just reach out and ask people, because you never know. People might be questioning this, never ask anybody, and accept a trade. So getting into it. First question is going to be 2 running backs here. Dalvin Cook or Le'Veon Bell in a PPR. Who would I rather have? Who am I drafting? So I'm just going to jump right back to the ADP, and I just want to show you guys, I think Le'Veon Bell going in the first round is it's just funny to me because I had Le'Veon Bell last year, and of course it was a mistake. I held on to him hoping for him to play. He burnt a lot of people, but that's a whole season gone. Le'Veon Bell's never had the workload as a running back, and he's going into the Jets organization, bad offensive line. He's used to playing behind a good offensive line. He's used to playing on almost the number one passing team in the league. So Le'Veon Bell is in for a rude awakening, and being picked at the end of the first round is such a mistake. I would rather wait until the middle of the second and get somebody who's possibly going to be better. I mean, Le'Veon Bell is going to be on my rankings behind James Conner, behind Damian Williams, behind Dalvin Cook, Todd Gurley, possibly behind Leonard Fournette. I'm going to put him pretty far down there towards that Marlon Mack area and Devontae Freeman. So Le'Veon Bell is someone to me that I'm pushing aside. I'm drafting a wide receiver at the end of the first round. Give me that Julio Jones, Devontae Adams, and then on the turn, I'll take Dalvin Cook and be completely happy with that instead of having a Le'Veon Bell and a who's dropping there and like an Odell. I'd rather have the Dalvin Cook and Julio or Dalvin Cook and Devontae Adams. So next question is going to be a QB and a wide receiver. So would you rather take Patrick Mahomes at 302 or T.Y. Hilton at 302? And just like every pro out there, every analyst out there, is stay away from your quarterbacks. I mean, if this was a super flex league, then Patrick Mahomes at the 302 would be a steal. So I'm guessing that this is not. This is just a redraft. Patrick Mahomes right now is going at the middle of the third. And to me, that is just crazy. I know that he scored a ton of points, but guess where I got him last year? I got him in round like 16 last year. And if that's not to show you that you can find somebody later in the rounds, I'm not saying you're going to find a Patrick Mahomes, but I am saying that you're going to draft somebody in the 16th round like a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson, or, I mean, even like Kirk Cousins down there or Jameis Winston. Pick up one of these guys in these rounds and take your T.Y. Hilton. I mean, at the 302, I'm not taking T.Y. Hilton at the 302. There's so many better wide receivers there. But on my ADP, you got Patrick Mahomes and then T.Y. Hilton is at the end of the third. I'm doing that all day if I were to pick between those two. Let somebody else take Patrick Mahomes, and they're missing out on like a Mike Evans, or they're missing out on like a Leonard Fournette, a T.Y. Hilton. I mean, there's so many better people you can draft there. And give me that Matt Ryan even. If you're going to take somebody early, like I was talking up, Matt Ryan is going around the 8th round. Same with like Drew Brees in that area. I'm not taking any of Drew Brees this year, but Matt Ryan is somebody that I am looking at completely. If we're going to be drafting Julio Jones as like a top 3 wide receiver, and then we're drafting Calvin Ridley in like the 6th, 5th round. I mean, you got to have somebody that's throwing him the ball, and I'm taking Matt Ryan all day. So that's it for the questions. Anything to close it out here? I'm just excited to get into our redraft, and I'm excited for this podcast to push it to 2 days. I know that I'm doing it by myself today just because Ryan's sick, but we're going to be pushing it to 2 days a week. We're following all of the pros around there. So if you're listening to all the podcasts and you want to listen to us, we get all of our information from SleeperBot. We get all of our information from playing so much fantasy football. I can't wait to be an analyst and be a podcaster this year and hopefully in the future years, just to let everybody know what's going on in the league, what to do on a weekly basis. I want to be there for you before that Thursday night game and before that Sunday. So we will be live drafting. And one other thing I wanted to touch on is that I am very excited to be able to live stream our draft. And we're going to, I'm going to make sure I set up my entire computer. What I'm looking at right here, I'm taking it to Ryan's house where we do our live draft. And I'm just going to walk through exactly what I'm thinking. And it's going to be all live. And I'm going to keep track of all of the draft board on the computer so everyone else at home, if you're following, you can keep track of it. So if you want to know where you're going to find that, jump into the description and you're going to see the Twitch handles. Mine is BowTYz, BowTYz. You got Ryan down there also. He's in there as a Dynasty. So click in there. Make sure you follow. So whenever we go live, you'll be able to click in and ask any questions. And also, just make sure that you go on to whatever you're listening to and just please subscribe, rate. If it's YouTube, we're posting everything to YouTube under the MVP Sports Fantasy. So go on there, like, subscribe, comment. All the comments help. We just want to push kind of us out there. And pretty soon we're going to be posting a lot on social media, just letting people know where we're at, where you can find us, and hopefully that we are there to help. Also, I'm setting up our Excel sheets for our top 200. I have the Dynasty one, but I just was unable to post it in the description last week because I'm having a hard time getting the one cloud to work. So I'm going to work on that today and try to get it out to everybody in this description. If it's not there, I'm going to be posting it as soon as I get it up. So appreciate everyone sticking around. If you're in the Wisconsin area, just stay cool out there. Keep your fans going. Keep your AC on. And I'm very excited for the season to start up. We are very, very close, and it is only going to move faster and faster each week. So take care, everyone, and good luck with your mock drafts.